Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Mothercraft College of Early Childhood Education online Family Support Certificate course. As a friendly reminder, this is session 8 of the Family Support course. In this session, we will be thinking about the importance of taking an ecological perspective and recognizing the interdependent nature of family life. This means that we will be thinking about the interactions of people and groups within a variety of social and cultural environments. This is about looking at the larger environment surrounding a person or family when trying to find ways to support. To do this, we will explore Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, a model designed to help us consider and identify how the qualities of children, families, and their environments interact to influence how they grow and develop. This model encourages us to reflect on children and families in multiple environments or systems to help understand their development. This model will continue to build on our knowledge and discussions from previous sessions, where we began to consider the many micro and macro systems that surround our family units. Today, we will weave these pieces together as we spend some time discussing those different systems and their impact on children and families and the supports that we can provide. This also relates to how does learning happen and learning through relationships, as how does learning happen also encourages us to take a holistic view of families and children by considering the environments and relationships that surround them. Therefore, we will also discuss Figure 1 in How Does Learning Happen, the triangle figure, which reminds us that learning and development happens in the context of relationships between children, families, educators, and their environments. When we do this, we become better able to create welcoming and inclusive environments that build on the strengths of children and families and foster engagement and co-learning opportunities for all of us. Finally, we will begin to consider ways to support families in a variety of more challenging situations. When supporting all families, it's important that we take the time to consider the many systems, environments, and relationships that surround the family unit. As you may recall from Session 7, identifying resources and strengths in the family's surrounding environments and relationships is one of the many ways in which we can take a strength-based approach to support. This is particularly important when we encounter families or children who are experiencing more difficult or challenging life circumstances and situations. In order to gain a better and more holistic view of the situation and opportunities for support, we need to consider all of the surrounding factors and relationships that influence or affect the family's situations too. Let's begin with a quick review of our content from last class. Last class, we talked about Family Support Principle number 5, which tells us that family support programs work to increase opportunities to strengthen individuals, families, and communities. Strengthening individuals, families, and communities requires us to first have a good understanding of what a strength-based approach is, so that we can effectively apply it in our communication and interactions with others. We explored the meaning of a strength-based approach and took a closer look at what this approach looks like with regards to supporting children, families, and others in the community, and how to recognize strengths in everyone. We continued to think about our capacities to support families and caregivers through the fostering of the 4 foundations of How Does Learning Happen by using a strength-based approach that views all families as competent, capable, and rich in strengths and potential. We also explored our abilities to reflect on our communication practices with families and enhance child and family growth and development through non-judgmental partnerships that support opportunities to strengthen all individual family members. We also took some time to reflect on our ability to effectively make referrals that rely on strengths that already exist in our children and families, while knowing how these strengths can be enriched through collaboration and co-learning, and ways to reflect this knowledge and understanding in the physical environment. Finally, we began to think about our abilities to demonstrate the guiding principles of family support by promoting confidence among families through family engagement and co-learning experiences that also communicate the goals of ongoing collaborative and inquiry-based experiences. Let's continue now by thinking about our family support principle for today's session. In today's session, we will be taking a look at family support principle number 6, which tells us that family support programs operate from an ecological perspective that recognizes the interdependent nature of families' lives. An ecological and holistic approach for understanding the interdependent nature of family units and their interacting environments is important to consider, as the functioning of the family as a system relates to their abilities and competencies for coping with crises and challenges on many levels: individual, family, community, and societal. An ecological approach can enhance our understanding of how behaviors and environmental conditions affect families and the institutions or organizations that they interact with. This approach can also provide a framework for the design and implementation of intervention programs and support systems that are based on the knowledge of family and environment interactions. This session will support a number of different learning outcomes, including learning outcome number 1, as we will continue to think about our capacities to support families and caregivers through the fostering of the 4 foundations of how does learning happen, by using a strength-based and ecological approach that views all families as competent, capable, and rich in strengths and potential. This session will also support learning outcome number 4, as we will continue to think about ways to facilitate supportive conversations through non-judgmental listening to gain a greater understanding of the relationships and systems that surround our family units, by recognizing child and family strengths and using these strengths as a starting point when providing additional support during more challenging situations. Therefore, this session will also support learning outcome number 5, as we will begin to think about our abilities to support families who are experiencing barriers or crisis within their lives. Let's continue by exploring Bronfenbrenner's ecological model and what it looks like on the next slide. American psychologist Yuri Bronfenbrenner developed the ecological systems theory to explain how the inherent qualities of children and their environments interact to influence how they grow and develop. The Bronfenbrenner ecological systems theory emphasizes the importance of considering children within the context of multiple environments, also known as ecological systems, in the attempt to understand their development. According to Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory, children typically find themselves involved in various ecosystems, from the most intimate home ecological system to the larger school system, and then to the most expansive systems, which include society and culture. Each of these ecological systems inevitably interact with and influence each other in all aspects of the child's lives. Bronfenbrenner's ecological model organizes these contexts of development into 5 different levels of external influence. These levels are categorized from the closest and most intimate level to the widest or larger influences on development. Before we discuss how Yuri Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory impacts our work with children and families, let's take a moment to discuss each system. The microsystem includes immediate environments, where the child experiences the most interaction. Bronfenbrenner suggested that the microsystem is the smallest and most immediate environment in which children live. The microsystem is comprised of the daily home, school or childcare, peer groups, and other community environments. Interactions within the microsystem typically involve personal relationships with family members, classmates, educators, and caregivers. How these groups or individuals interact with the children will directly affect how they grow. Similarly, how children react to the people in their microsystem will also influence how they are treated in return. More nurturing and more supportive interactions and relationships will naturally foster and enhance children's development. One of the most important findings from Bronfenbrenner's study of ecological systems is that it is possible for siblings who find themselves in the same ecological system to experience very different environments. Therefore, two siblings experiencing the same microsystem are still likely to develop in very different ways. Each child's particular personality and temperament is also influenced by unique genetic and biological factors that eventually play a part in how they are treated by others. The mesosystem includes the relationships between the microsystem and the broader environment. The mesosystem covers the interaction of the different microsystems which children and families find themselves in. For example, it is about the connections between home and school, between peer groups and family, and between families and communities. Let's take a concrete example to illustrate how the mesosystem might work according to Bronfenbrenner's theory. If a parent is actively involved in their child's friendships, for example, friends are invited over to the home from time to time and time is spent with them, the child's development will be affected positively. However, if the parent dislikes their child's peers and openly criticizes them, then the child experiences imbalance and conflicting emotions, which will likely lead to more negative development. The exosystem includes the social settings that affect the child, but do not directly include the child. The exosystem pertains to the connections that may exist between two or more settings, one of which may not include the child, but affect them indirectly nonetheless. Based on the findings of Bronfenbrenner, people and places that children do not directly interact with may still have an impact on their lives. For example, consider the parents' workplaces, extended family members, and the neighborhood the children live in. A parent or caregiver who is frustrated with their career or has extended long work hours may behave quite differently at home as a result. The macrosystem includes the culture in which the child and family lives. The macrosystem is the largest but most distant collection of people and places to children and families, but still has a significant influence on the family unit. This ecological system is comprised of the child and family's cultural patterns and values, and more specifically, their dominant beliefs and ideas, as well as political and economic systems and influences. For example, children in war-torn areas experience a different kind of development than children who are raised in more peaceful environments. Finally, the chronosystem includes larger events and the timing of circumstances that may affect development. The chronosystem adds the useful dimension and consideration of time, which demonstrates the influence of both change and constancy in the environments. The chronosystem may include a change in family structure, address, parents' employment status, or immense societal changes such as economic cycles or political events and influences. The use of technology, for example, has changed significantly over time, affecting children and families in ways that are far different than that of even 10 years ago. By studying the various ecological systems, Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems theory is able to demonstrate the diversity of interconnected influences on a child's development. Awareness of the many contexts that children and families are in can help to sensitize us to variations in the way children may behave in different settings. For example, a child who seems to frequently bully smaller children may behave very differently in the home environment. Due to these variations, adults and educators who are concerned with the care of a particular child should pay close attention to their behavior in different settings, as well as to the quality and type of relationships and connections that exist between these settings. Now let's think about how all of this relates to our work on the next slide. Now that we've had a chance to explore the 5 levels of systems, as described by Yuri Bronfenbrenner, let's continue by thinking about what this means for our work with children and families. As the ecological systems theory demonstrates, we cannot evaluate a child or family's development by only considering their immediate environment. One of the core insights of an ecological perspective is that child and family development does not take place universally or in the same way for everyone. Their development takes place in the very specific contexts of their lives. Human ecology builds upon the scientific fact that child development does not work exactly the same way for everyone or in every situation. Rather, it occurs as a result of complex interactions between a child's biology and psychology, along with the influences of family, neighborhood, early learning programs, community, culture, and society. All of these factors combine to produce the context within which development takes place. As a result, when families ask the developmental question, "Does X cause Y?" the best scientific answer is, "It depends," because it depends upon who and where the child is in their life. Every characteristic of the context matters. When understanding and promoting child development and well-being, we must first attempt to understand the contextual approaches that the child and family are experiencing. In addition, we must also examine the interactions and relationships in the larger environments in order to effectively take an ecological and holistic approach to support, and especially when children and families are experiencing challenges in their daily lives. Let's continue to think about this as we watch a short video called The Ecological Model of Child Learning and Development.
Underpinning the Victorian Early Years Learning and Development Framework is the ecological model adapted from the work of Yuri Bronfenbrenner. When you look at this model, you see the child at the very center. As you move out from the center, you see each child's life within a particular cultural, community, economic, political, social, and environmental context. Imagine each child that you work with at the center of the model. Each one is unique, active, and engaged in their learning and development within their local context, shaped by their family, culture, and experience. A local child's community, cultural events, spaces, and their accessibility reinforce a sense of belonging and well-being for a child and their family. Families and kinship members have primary influence on their child's health, learning, and development, shaping each child's sense of belonging, being, and becoming. You can also see how the model shows the network of community services and programs that support each child's health, learning, and development. Each adult around the child learns, leads, supports, and actively invests in the child's success. Every professional who engages with a child and their family has a part to play. Based on the ecological model, the practice principles help professionals to consider and play a pivotal part in working with and supporting children and families. Children learn about themselves and construct their own identity within the context of their families and communities. This includes their relationships with people, places, and things, and the actions and responses of others. Identity is not fixed. It is shaped by experiences. When children have positive experiences, they develop an understanding of themselves as significant and respected, and feel a sense of belonging. Relationships are the foundations for the construction of identity. Who I am, how I belong, and what is my influence.
Now that we've explored Bronfenbrenner's ecological model and what it means, let's take a moment to reflect and consider how Bronfenbrenner's ecological model relates specifically to your daily work with children and families, and what this looks like in your daily practices. Ask yourselves, what does this model look like for the families who attend your programs? What relationships are present in each of the systems that surround the child and family in your community? Do you have some families with multiple children? What might be the experiences of each individual child within the family unit? Do all families have extended family members or large social networks, or do you notice that this varies significantly from family to family? What about their work hours? What relationships exist within the community itself? When thinking about the children and families who attend your programs, ask yourselves what would be present in the microsystem, mesosystem, exosystem, and macrosystem. In addition, remember to consider the chronosystem too. Are there any larger events that have occurred in your community or globally that may affect child and family development? From the perspective of family support work, the significance of the ecological model directly compels us to consider the interdependent nature of families' lives in a holistic manner. This means that we are paying attention not just to the individual behaviors of a child or parent, but also to the broader context of the individual's life, including home life, school or childcare, the neighborhood, work, and the values and attitudes of the society that we live in. This all relates to how does learning happen, as our pedagogy also encourages us to take a holistic and ecological perspective to child development and family support. Let's explore the connection between Bronfenbrenner's model and our pedagogy on the next slide. On this slide, we will consider the connection between Bronfenbrenner's ecological model and our pedagogy in Ontario. How Does Learning Happen also encourages us to evaluate development by considering the relationships in the child and family's surrounding environments. To do this, we need to consider all of the systems that are present in the child and family's life. As discussed on our previous slides, it's important to understand what systems are in place and what influences these systems may have on development. Reflecting on these perspectives and environments are great starting points when developing programs and thinking about practices that support well-being and development, particularly from a strength-based approach. As you can see, there was a strong connection between the ecological model and the concepts outlined in How Does Learning Happen. Both approaches recognize the dynamic connections between individual educators, the families, and the environment in which they live, and their impacts on the child. On the next slide, we have included a short self-reflection exercise to help us understand these ecological concepts beyond theory and into practice. To help us understand what it means to take an ecological perspective, we have included a short self-reflection exercise on this slide. For this exercise, think about your own childhood, upbringing, environments, and experiences, and consider, how do you think your own family dynamics, significant adult figures, and other events in your childhood influenced your development as a child and while growing up? How would you describe the people, places, and events that remain important to you? And what has a strong influence in your life now? When reflecting on these questions, consider how these influences relate to the micro and macro systems that we've just discussed, and as described in Bronfenbrenner's ecological model. Which of these influences belong to the microsystems, mesosystems, exosystems, and macrosystems? If appropriate, are there any chronosystem influences that you feel had an impact on your life as a child? It's important to consider our own perspectives on human development and how context influences our perspectives. Reflecting on our own experiences and influences can be helpful for understanding the experiences and influences of others, as through our own self-reflection, we become better able to relate to the relevant concepts and understandings needed for supporting all children and families, and for having supportive conversations that foster the positive relationships and partnerships needed with families and communities. As quoted on this slide, from conception on, a child's world is shaped by other individuals, available resources, opportunities, and cultural patterns. Because each child is different, children who experience similar environments can have very different outcomes. In turn, children themselves affect their environments. Every human being is unique. Although we may share qualities with others, there are no two beings who are exactly alike. Even identical twins differ from each other as they continue to grow. Their experiences will be uniquely different. Children come into the world with unique genetic predispositions that listen and respond to the world around them. Children grow up surrounded by people, places, and events that shape their daily lives and future prospects. Think about the immense variation of geography, cultures, socio-political circumstances, and economies around the world. With this ecological perspective, we can examine influences on children, families, and communities, and use this information to guide our strategies for co-learning opportunities and support. Family support programs view parenting and caregiving as a lifelong learning process. Family skills, knowledge, and insights develop along with their children's development. An ecological perspective on family support acknowledges that families are diverse and begin their parenting and caregiving lives at different emotional and social places, which influence parenting styles and are shaped by current circumstances as well as personal and family histories. In doing so, our capacity to create a welcoming environment and have supportive conversations is heightened. We are better able to develop responsive program ideas because we've considered the complex context and systems in which families and children live. Now that we've had a chance to explore Bronfenbrenner's ecological model and what it means to take an ecological perspective in our practices with children and families, let's continue by thinking about various life situations that families may be experiencing and how we can use a holistic and ecological lens to engage in supportive conversations with them. Let's now continue by thinking about some different life situations families in your programs may experience. During times of stress, personal coping resources, and consequently parenting and caregiving skills may need some extra support. A separation or divorce, an illness or death, moving to a new home, a pregnancy, a change in employment, or perhaps a more serious financial issue like a home foreclosure can result in a storm of feelings and experiences for children and families alike. Our unique perceptions and reactions to an event and our personal coping resources will elicit a stress response. Two people experiencing the very same situation may cope very differently. One may feel intense emotional or mental tension, while the other experiences only a slight inconvenience. When caring for children during times of high stress, keep in mind that stress may affect the child very differently from how it affects the parent or caregiver. Just as parenting coping resources may be weakened during times of stress, children may behave very differently from their norm when under great stress too. Recognizing the symptoms of stress and identifying the stressor is extremely important. You may recall the works of Dr. Stuart Shanker here and our discussions on self-regulation, stress, and well-being in previous sessions. A change in behavior often is a key indicator of stress. To support families during times of stress, it is helpful to take an ecological perspective to identify strengths within the family's surrounding systems and leverage the relationships and other resources that can support the family during this time. Let's take a look at some of the various life situations that your families may be experiencing on the next slide. On this slide, we've included some examples of various situations that families attending your programs may be experiencing. Even positive life situations, such as a marriage or a birth, can trigger stress in a child and family, as any amount of change can take some time to adjust to. Let's watch a short video from the Center on the Developing Child at Harvard University called How Children and Adults Can Build Core Capabilities for Life, which addresses the theory that building core adult capabilities for managing stressful situations is needed to help improve child and family outcomes.
Building core capabilities for life. Every day we take on the ordinary, sometimes challenging tasks of work, school, parenting, relationships, and just managing our busy lives. How do we navigate these tasks successfully? And what can send us off course? Science offers an explanation. We all need a set of core capabilities that we can develop with practice over time. Scientists call them executive function or self-regulation skills, and they help us to focus on what's important, to plan ahead, set goals, and meet them. They help us deal with whatever life throws at us and still keep heading where we need to go. They help us resist impulsive behaviors.
Stop.
And change course when we need to. No one is born with executive function skills, but everyone can build them. We build them through a lifetime of making connections within and among the regions of the brain. Our brains begin life with billions of neurons, rapidly connecting to each other as we experience the world around us, making trillions of connections in just a few years. Early simple circuits form a foundation that more complex circuits and skills build on as we grow and have new experiences. These complex circuits, built throughout childhood and reaching across vast regions of the brain, make our core capabilities possible. The more we use these connections, the stronger and faster they become. That's why practice is so important. When we are children, we practice these skills by playing games, learning teamwork, adjusting to new rules. We continue to develop these skills in adolescence by managing school and other things like work, sports, music, and relationships. When we practice executive function skills, circuits rapidly connect the prefrontal cortex to other parts of the brain. These circuits act like an air traffic control system in the brain. They manage incoming information and help us respond with intention, not on impulse. Threatening or stressful experiences activate different circuits, and those trigger automatic responses: fight, flight, or freeze. We need automatic responses for survival, but if stress is constant, these automatic fight or flight circuits become stronger and faster than our more productive intentional circuits, the ones we use for executive function and self-regulation. For anyone under stress, it's hard to call on intentional skills. If we've been experiencing serious stress from our earliest years, the stress caused by poverty, violence, or addiction, a chaotic environment, it's even harder. Under lots of stress every day, it's harder still. The key is counterbalancing those automatic responses by building up our intentional ones, by building strong executive function skills. The good news is these core capabilities can be strengthened. How? By redesigning our systems so they reduce the sources of stress in people's lives, by simplifying how services are provided to families, helping them meet basic needs and building on strengths, because small successes lead to bigger ones. With less stress, we can practice the skills we already have and build new circuits for the intentional responses we need. Stronger brain circuits are built through practice in situations that matter. That's true for children, it's true for adolescents, and it's true for adults. Helping children build skills gives them a strong foundation for all that comes later. Helping teens build their skills propels them into greater success as adults and parents. And helping adult caregivers build their core capabilities ensures success at work, stable homes, and responsive relationships for the next generation. When our communities work together to help children and adults build these skills, we create a positive cycle as one generation passes them on to the next. And that helps us all.
As you can see from the video, all families require a bit of extra support at some point in their lives. It also takes a village to be able to provide holistic support from an ecological lens, to be able to identify the strengths that exist in the family's surrounding systems as a starting point for building supportive structures for the child and family. To do this, we need to be observant and attuned to changing family dynamics. Remember, families are never stagnant. They are always in constant motion as they grow and change, and as their lives grow and change. This is why it's important to recognize that a big part of our role as educators and family support workers is to practice making objective observations, as discussed in Session 7, and to build on initial interactions with families to form responsive, respectful, trusting relationships that will provide a secure environment for families to have conversations on an ongoing basis. When we do this, we become better able to take a holistic and ecological perspective to support with the child and family. Through the knowledge gained from our trusting relationships and objective observations, we become better able to offer meaningful supports that are developmentally appropriate and relevant to both the child and family. When considering supports for the family, it's important to maintain a strength-based approach that builds on the existing strengths and capabilities of the child and family themselves by looking at the resources that are available within the family's surrounding micro and macro systems. Also, when considering supports for the child and family, remember to stay within your training and know when to offer resources or referrals for additional supports. For families who are experiencing a range of challenging life situations, they may require the support of other professionals who work outside of your early learning community. It is better to say, "I don't know, but let's find out together," than to pretend you have the answer to an important problem that the family is facing, and particularly when it is out of the scope of our practice. Being honest with the family about your skill set and expertise is another way to engage in supportive conversations with the family, as through this co-learning experience, the family comes to realize that you are open to the support of others in your practice, and it is okay to seek additional help from someone else when questions or concerns arise. Research shows that social support provides important benefits to our physical and emotional health. Stress may be related to a number of health concerns, from mental health issues to chronic health problems like heart disease or migraines. However, good social support can help protect people from the harmful effects of stress. When dealing with a stressful situation, people are less likely to report stress-related health problems when they feel like they have ample support from others. This connects to our discussion on wellness, stress, and self-regulation in Session 6, and also relates to today's discussions, as we need to take a look at all of the family's surrounding support systems and practice taking an ecological perspective, which includes the family's larger community. It is about recognizing the interdependent nature of a family's life, which means families rely on support from others as they navigate through life. Let's continue by first exploring some considerations for families who may be experiencing separation or divorce. 4 in 10 Canadian couples who married in 2008 will be divorced by 2035, according to a report from the Vanier Institute of the Family in 2011. This rate has been relatively stable for more than 10 years. Divorce is a process that involves loss, grief, anger, endings, and new patterns and routines. Divorce is sometimes the best option for some families and can actually provide a sense of relief for all those concerned. However, children who experience divorce in their families don't just experience one loss. They experience a series of losses as different people come and go. Depending on the child's age and the individual family unit, they may also likely experience uncertainty and unpredictability with changes in their daily routines and patterns. Separation and divorce can be a life-transforming experience, and most experts agree that in some cases, it can be more devastating for the child than for the adults, and the effects of the experience are often long-lasting. Studies also indicate that a child's attitudes about relationships, society, and themselves can be forever changed by the separation and by the related events that occur thereafter as a result. The first 2 years after separation is known as the crisis period for adults and children. The crisis period begins for children with shock, anxiety, and anger once learning about the separation itself. In addition, there may already be other effects in place, as the child may have observed or experienced some conflict before the separation or divorce occurred. During the crisis period, it is important to address the following 2 needs: additional emotional support as they try to cope with the breakup, and structure provided by a reasonably predictable daily routine with trusted adults. Likewise, adults within the family unit will have similar needs and require similar supports. Most families and children are able to recover from the crisis period within about 2 to 3 years. Eventually, wounds from the situation begin to heal, and both the child and family are able to stabilize their lives. It's also important to note that child-adult relationships also tend to improve over time, and once a new and consistent routine has been established. It is also important to note that the term single parent or lone parent can be misleading. Although the parent or caregiver may no longer live with the child, other important non-parent adults may. Other individuals, including grandparents, relatives, siblings, or friends, may help to perform significant caregiving roles. Furthermore, an absent parent can still remain very active in a child's life and continue to provide child-rearing and financial support. In addition, lone parent families by choice are becoming increasingly common. Some women are choosing to have a child through artificial insemination, through a surrogate mother, or with a consenting partner who will have little or no role in the child's life. Therefore, we should not assume that single parenting has a negative effect on the child. Similarly, children may be affected by divorce and separation, but that doesn't mean that there will be permanent negative outcomes for the child. Involving the child's village in their care and upbringing can be seen as a positive strength, as we come to realize that there are a variety of social systems in place that can help to provide love and support to the family. This again relates to Bronfenbrenner's ecological model, as Yuri Bronfenbrenner recognized that adverse experiences don't have to lead to negative outcomes. When we use an ecological and holistic lens, we can see that when good surrounding support systems for the child and family are in place, the child is still able to reach their highest potential and optimal development. With this lens, we see the valuable contributions early on family support programs have for all families. As professionals, we need to always reflect and examine our own feelings and emotional reactions to separation, divorce, and single parenting. As human beings, we tend to bring our own histories into our practices. If we are not in touch with our own feelings, we may react emotionally ourselves. Researchers cite situations where educators cried, took the side of one parent or another, gave personal advice, scolded parents and encouraged them not to seek divorce, or referred families inappropriately, as the referrals were made from a place of emotion rather than from objective observations. Families who are experiencing separation and divorce need non-judgmental support from professionals who refrain from taking sides and instead maintain a neutral position. A neutral and positive approach is also a key strategy for seeing strengths in the family and connects directly to our earlier learnings in past sessions on self-reflection and being aware of our own potential biases to prevent them from impacting our work with families and children. Now let's continue to think about a few more situations for families on the next slide. On this slide, we will discuss a few considerations for families who may be experiencing illness or death. Families in which a serious illness is diagnosed will need some time to adjust and adapt to the situation. Typically, in these situations, most of our attention is paid to the person who is ill, and the needs of others may be inadvertently minimized, forgotten, or even ignored. Household chores, meal preparation, and supervision of children can become much more difficult to manage, and over time, this may result in a crisis situation as the caregiver's ability to meet everyone's needs becomes strained. In addition, the caregiver may also become ill or unwell while trying to cope with a range of emotions and demands. For children, it is important to have age-appropriate conversations about the illness or death to help them understand the seriousness of the situation with tact and sensitivity. Experts believe that we should not protect children from what is happening in their own families. Children will have a smoother adjustment to the change if they feel included and if they know, to their level of understanding, what is going on. It's important to give children the opportunity to work through their feelings at the same time as everyone else. During difficult times, it is important for family support professionals to understand some of the cultural and religious practices of the family. In some instances, professionals may be seen as active participants in the family's grieving process. In other situations, the family may prefer to maintain their privacy about family arrangements or other details of their family lives. As professionals, it's best to seek cultural information regarding ways the family may be mourning or grieving the change of events in their lives. Families may ask questions about how they can support the child at home during this difficult process. The answers that we provide to families depend on the information shared by the family, the age of the child, temperaments, religious teachings, and cultural influences. For some children, attending a funeral can bring a sense of closure during a difficult time. For others, it may create even more anxiety or be culturally inappropriate. When in doubt, ask the child what will help to make them feel better, and they will often tell you. Lean on your objective observations of the family and the child, and share this information in your conversations with the family. As you continue to observe the child and family, remember to take note of any behaviors that may require interventions from other professionals and continue to maintain an open dialogue with the whole family unit. The symptoms for grief regarding death or diagnosis are wide and varied. It is important to remember that families and children will be affected in unique ways, and it's also important for us to understand the implications of these experiences as much as we can. Our responses to each family will therefore vary and should be responsive to the unique complexities of each circumstance rather than expecting a universal reaction or universal response. We also want to encourage families to model age-appropriate honesty with the children as much as possible. It is ideal for children to know what is happening as soon as possible. It is likely that they will sense something is wrong anyway, so it is far better for them to hear what's happening from a trusted adult than finding out in a different way. When there are no secrets among family members, they can better support each other. For many families, explaining serious illness or death to the children is one of the hardest parts of the situation, and this will vary from family to family. Sometimes, different generations have different ideas of how, when, or what to say to children. Some families believe that children shouldn't be told or involved in the situation to avoid upsetting them and to protect them from the pain. Let's take one example of a family experiencing cancer. Perhaps they've shared that they're not sure what to say to the child. This is an ideal opportunity to dialogue with the family of their comfort level to use the actual terms or words, to share information, and concrete experiences that are age appropriate for the child. Are they comfortable using the word cancer? Will the family be in the hospital or at home? Are there treatments planned for the near future? Will the family member look a bit different? If there are siblings involved, the information should be shared with everyone at the same time. The level of understanding may be different depending on the ages of the children, but they will all feel included. It's ideal to explain to children how things will look or change over time, as this will help to build predictability in an otherwise unpredictable situation. Simultaneously, families will have observed you consistently modeling age-appropriate honesty with children as part of your daily programming. This takes place when we have discussions and learning opportunities with children about the life cycle of plants and animals, the melting of snow, the changes that take place when colors mix together, and so on. Depending on how the family responds, you will also know the level of information you're able to share with children while they are attending programming. If the child asks you a question during programming and you're not quite sure how to respond, this is the time to acknowledge the child's question and let them know you will provide more information after you've asked the family. Let children hear consistent information from both you and their family. Finally, if the family is experiencing death or illness, help the family to recognize that different support systems are available to them. In some early-on settings, there may already be a team of intervention professionals who are trained to support families during difficult times. If not, you may want to consider referrals that serve as important supports for both the family and educators. Remember, it's important to stay within your training and know when to offer additional resources or referrals for support. Let's watch a video about a family's experience with death from today's parent called After Their Father Died: What It's Like After a Parent Dies.
One afternoon, a few months after my husband died, I absent-mindedly began dismantling a Lego friend's house, gathering dust on a shelf in my daughter's room. I tore off the pink roof and started tossing bricks into a shoebox. I was perpetually tidying, an obvious effort to create order in the chaos of loss. I'd sweep and scrub and shuffle papers, anything to keep my hands busy. I was postponing decisions on what to do with John's shirts and socks. And I was preparing for the biggest test of my life, raising our 2 kids on my own. I was down to the toy house's plastic foundation before I realized what I'd done, and I felt sick. I could clearly remember seeing my daughter Maisie sitting beside her dad, piecing the dream home together brick by brick. She had just received the toy as a Christmas gift, and John was as excited as she was to tackle the project. And now, in some over-functioning stupor, I had carelessly demolished the only home they would ever make together. This, in a nutshell, is grief and parenting, stumbling, fumbling, and trying to move forward while clinging to a past that can't be preserved. My daughter was furious when she saw what I'd done. I'm not sure if she was angry because I broke part of a connection to her dad, or simply because I invaded her space. I felt too guilty to ask, and now it's unlikely she remembers, but I do. It still makes me ache. But the Lego incident is just one of 100 situations with no easy solution that we've gone through since my husband died. Remaking the house would not make things better. Some things can't be rebuilt. From the day our kids were born, John embraced being a dad. He was calm and capable, never flustered, and he lived like the glass was more than half full. It was overflowing. He'd make jokes and have lively chats with gurgling Dexter on the change table. He'd ask in an excited voice what his baby Maisie might do that day. Was she toddling off to a construction site, a Bay Street legal firm? On particularly rushed mornings, after everyone was finally out the door, he would get us to pause in the backyard and smell the blossoms on a tree or look at a particular flower. When we found out John had esophageal cancer, Maisie had just started grade 1, and her brother Dexter begun grade 4. We dreaded telling them their dad was sick, but we knew we had to be blunt and honest. There are no words to make this kind of news taste less bitter. We crossed our fingers the bubble of childhood would help insulate them. But John got sicker faster than we ever could have imagined. That school year quickly became full of learning, how to live with illness, and then learning how to live with death. And the kids had to adjust to their dad being slowly taken away from them. Chemotherapy made him too weak to play Climb the Mountain, a game where he would hold their hands while they climbed up his body. And we had to retire the nighttime Heidi game, a bit of bedtime silliness where John would look all over our daughter's room for her. He would make a big production of searching cupboards and drawers until finally he'd sit down on her bed in mock frustration, only to find the bed was lumpy, and he'd feign surprise at discovering under the covers his giggling little girl. As John's health declined, new roles emerged. Maisie helped care for her dad. She'd play nurse, put on plastic gloves, and shake the food for her dad's feeding tube. And bedtime routines changed. Instead of John going to their rooms to read, the kids would come to his bed. Often he was too tired to read, so Dexter would take over, reading stories of Percy Jackson and the Olympians and other plucky heroes, survivors. In John's final days, I set up a campsite on the floor of our bedroom. The kids and I cuddled together on pillows beside the bed, reading stories, listening to music, and talking, while their dad drifted further away from us. John did not even make it to the end of the school year. He died at the end of April. The immediate aftermath was a blur. I had to contact friends, find a place for the funeral, and keep breathing. At night, the three of us would collapse in a heap on a mattress in the floor of our bedroom. Our strength was bolstered in our nest, and in the months that followed, it was vital for the kids that we stick to our family traditions. But while some routines are the same, everything feels different. 3 years on, we still celebrate John's birthday and enjoy his favorite dinner, butter chicken, and we have cake. Now there's an additional day on our calendar. We call the day John died Daddy Day. I take the kids to lunch and we skip the afternoon of school. We explore parks where we haven't been before, and we drive around listening to John's favorite songs on a CD his best friend made for us. I've always been a mom who creates lists for everything. Lists of what gets done during the week, lists for groceries, lists for house repairs. So now I keep lists of achievable fun. Parks or festivals we could go to, simple adventures. Each check mark is an accomplishment of getting through another first without their dad. Go to the park, check. Visit the driving range, check. Take a vacation as a family of 3, check. And when we are jumping into pools, binging on roasted marshmallows, and having fun, I feel like we are closest to John. I know he would want nothing less than this. We are less fragile today, but we will always be mourning. There's a new kind of growth chart in our lives. Instead of marking their height against pencil notches on a door frame, our progress can almost be gauged against a spiritual yardstick. But as much as we are lurching forward, we don't welcome the widening distance of the time from when John was here. The biggest lesson the kids are learning is one I never wanted to teach them, and one I didn't want to live. You don't get to outgrow grief or graduate from it. Like stepping on a stray piece of Lego, it's painfully searing, catching you when you least expect it.
On this slide, we will continue to think about supporting families in various situations by considering families who are managing diverse abilities or special or exceptional needs. Diverse abilities may need a variety of supports that vary in complexity, and society tends to view parents and caregivers with special needs as dependent individuals who further complicated their lives by having children. The disability or diverse abilities of the family must be understood, not as a problem for the family that must be fixed, but rather by taking an ecological perspective that acknowledges the extent to which the family has been successful in their caregiving efforts and to appreciate the family context, while offering supports that break down barriers which may not exist for other families. Studies have shown that children and their parents or caregivers are able to create flexible family systems that are not bound by traditional expectations of employment with regards to age, gender, or physical conditions. Supporting all families requires us to exercise our active listening abilities while providing opportunities for expression as described in How Does Learning Happen? For families with children of various diagnoses, parent and caregiver reactions can also vary with regards to the child's diverse abilities. In addition, consideration must also be given to different cultural responses to identified needs or diverse abilities. Some cultures may view the identified need as fate and something that must be endured. Other cultures may see the diverse need or disability as the result of something the mother did wrong in pregnancy or as punishment for a sin, therefore seeing it as the family's fault and responsibility. Families may also find it difficult to accept and seek assistance from non-family members. When working with families from a variety of cultural backgrounds in a variety of situations, professionals must be aware of cultural or religious beliefs and family traditions that may also influence actions or reactions from the family. Remember, when working with children and families of diverse needs and abilities, only trained experts and professionals can assess and diagnose others. As we've already discussed, be aware of the limits of your training and expertise, and know when to seek counsel from other professionals. When we do this, we take an ecological perspective and approach to support by including and strengthening connections and opportunities for support in the larger community. On the next slide, we will explore a few strategies for supporting all families in various situations through supportive conversations, active, non-judgmental listening, and strength-based engagement with families. The situations just discussed are just a few of the more common scenarios that we may experience when working with the children and families who attend our programs. Families may encounter a much wider range of challenging situations. These can include financial or housing challenges, newcomer or settlement challenges, education or employment challenges, challenges within their domestic relationships, which may include abuse or harassment, health challenges or mental health and dependency situations, and so on. In addition, when families are experiencing challenges, it is likely that there will be compounding factors or compounding challenges in place. For example, a newcomer family experiencing employment challenges may also be experiencing financial or housing struggles. A family who learns of a pregnancy may also worry about financial strain or job loss. The stress of these challenges can then impact physical and mental health and trigger dependencies or other coping or escapism mechanisms. Continue to use a strength-based and relational approach when responding to families and children. Regardless of the situation, children, families, and educators gain from an ecological and holistic perspective that recognizes the interdependent nature of families' lives. It helps us all to recognize strengths, resources, and opportunities for co-learning and growth. No matter how challenging the situation or circumstance, there is always a strength that is demonstrated and resources that can be utilized. For all families, use tact and sensitivity when engaging in conversation with families about their current situations, whatever those situations may be. Remain interested and ask questions, but don't pry for information. Be open and honest regarding your thoughts and ideas for supporting the child and family. But remember to use our effective communication strategies as discussed in previous sessions. Recall our Chinese character to listen as discussed in session 7 and what it means for facilitating supportive conversations with families. It's important to avoid language such as "you should have" or "could have," as this implies that the family should have done something differently. It's important to avoid language that may inadvertently cause the family to put blame on themselves for the situation. Continue to use a strength-based approach by reminding families of the consistent and positive moments that occur during their participation in your program. Celebrating small successes with a family and child can help them to see their own strengths beyond the program room too. And finally, co-inquire with colleagues or mentors when you are supporting families who are going through a difficult situation. Often, other professionals can provide a unique perspective or view of the situation and have additional strategies or resources to recommend or share. In addition, you may need some support as well. As empathetic individuals, we sometimes experience emotions with our families and may need our own social support systems in place to better support the child and family. Similar to the messaging that we share with families, seeking support and guidance from other professionals can be seen as a strength, and including the input of others helps us to take a more holistic and ecological approach to strategies for support. When working with children and families in various situations, the key is to ask caring and gentle questions. When we do this, we let the family know that we are willing to help. These supportive and non-judgmental conversations provide us with opportunities to learn more about the family's needs and create environments and opportunities for strengthening all family members. In addition, these conversations help us to understand when not to give advice too. If the family is already overwhelmed, They may just need someone to listen while they express themselves. Continue to reflect on your own communication strategies and recall our discussions from Session 7 about formal and informal communication practices with families. Finally, it's important to also be familiar with mandatory reporting requirements. If a family or child is in danger, we are obligated as professionals to report our concerns appropriately. If you are unsure, check with your manager or leadership team for further support. Remember, seeking additional community support is another way of practicing a holistic and ecological approach to support. Now that we've had a chance to think about what it means to take an ecological and holistic perspective that recognizes the interdependent nature of families' lives, and the importance of using this approach when supporting families in various situations, here are some mandatory questions that I'd like to put forward to all of you as a summary of the concepts that we've just discussed. I'll ask these questions of you now, and we'll also post them on our online forum for further discussion. This is also an ideal time to pause the webinar if you'd like to make a few notes before moving on to the next slide. Consider: how does an ecological model and taking an ecological perspective help to support families who are experiencing barriers? How does taking an ecological perspective relate to the approaches outlined in How Does Learning Happen? And finally, why is it important to facilitate supportive and non-judgmental conversations with families in various situations? Thank you for taking the time to review and reflect on these questions, and I will be looking forward to your thoughts on the online discussion forum. As we come to the end of this webinar session, here are some final thoughts and a summary of the concepts that we've discussed today. With an underlying understanding that difficult conversations in trying times are best received within a trusting, respectful, and responsive relationship, remember to consider family life beyond the immediate environment by using an ecological perspective that examines relationships and systems in the larger environment too. Remember, all families need a little bit of support sometimes, but also remember to stay within your training and know when to offer referrals for additional supports or services. Remember to co-inquire with colleagues or mentors during difficult situations. In some cases, you may be experiencing emotions with the family, and you may need some support too. Finally, remember that there is no one-size-fits-all approach with family support, as it requires careful and objective observation and individual responses to families and their unique needs. For any questions about today's webinar session or the Family Support course, please feel free to reach out to me via email at athena.scleros@mothercraft.org. Friendly reminder to review the required readings and to post your responses to the mandatory discussion questions on the online discussion forum. Thank you for taking the time to complete today's webinar session. See you next time.